Hello and welcome to the Kentucky Historical Society. Today we will begin another virtual tour, this time of our main exhibition at the Kentucky History Center. A Kentucky Journey explores 12,000 years of Kentucky's history. Your tour today will be given by Megan Sauter with our education team and with Tressa Brown.
Hi, I'm the coordinator for the Kentucky Native American Heritage Commission, working for the Kentucky Heritage Council.
If you have any questions, be sure to ask them here, and I will act as your voice as we explore our exhibit on the first, the Kentucky's early people.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that Native Americans were in Kentucky 12,000 years ago. That's like a long time before any settlers started coming in across the Cumberland Gap. And one of the things that they did is they were building houses even thousands and thousands of years ago. So there were communities of Native people around. And most of the time they were hunters and gatherers. So they were started hunting things like deer and elk and bear and turkey. And so things that we're a little bit more familiar with. They were still collecting nuts and berries and roots and green plants for food and for medicine. So one of the things that we know that they used was cattail mats, which this house is partially made out of cattails. And that's kind of like the Walmart of the plant world, because you can do nearly anything with it, from make mats, and you can make light baskets out of the long leaves of the cattail. You can eat that we know they were eating, because we found remnants of those bones that had burned in the fires that they left for archaeologists to find. We can look at some of the things that the tools that they use, because archaeologists have found them. One of the tools that they used a long time ago, and probably the tool that was used for the longest period of time, is the atlatl, or spear thrower. So if you've ever found what most people know, but it was attached to a spear, because the bow and arrow wasn't wasn't developed until only about 1,300 years ago. So we're talking thousands of years before that. People were using these stone bone and antler throwers to throw their spears with and hunt. One of the things that changed during the late Archaic period, which is about 3,000, using pots to cook sunflower seeds and really, really small seeds back then. Now, some of the other things that they were producing or using, of course, the clay that they were using that was local clay. And then we found lots of designs on their clay pots that were either drawn on, or they would take,
or even a salt dough. We've shared a recipe of that, because later on in our lesson we're going to actually be making some clay pots using some of these same techniques that Miss Tressa is talking about.
Many, many thousands of years,
If you have any questions, make sure that you post them here, and I'll be glad to read your questions for Miss Tressa.
One of the things that we know that people use: hide, meat, the sinews or the tendons from the deer. And some of the times that they would use these to make the tools they would use for hunting. There's your spear thrower, and that's how it was used to throw overhand, kind of like throwing a ball, but it gave you a lot more distance, so it keep you safer if you were hunting. And the hooks oftentimes were made out of the antler from the deer. Other things that were used, the bone from deer were used for lots of different tools, for handles and for ornaments too. They made games out of the bones. They made hairpins. They made fish hooks. They made sewing instruments like an awl or needles or lacing pins. So they used those a lot too. So just because they lived a long time ago doesn't mean they didn't like pretty things. So they make ornaments out of antler and bone. They make them out of pottery and shell. And then they would produce whatever other clothes that they needed for wintertime and for summertime. Some of their clothes were also made from woven material from plants. So not everything was made from the animal hides. Oyster today, they just tossed the shells aside and they created these huge big middens or trash pits. And guess what else you get to find in a trash pit is all the things that people throw out of their house. It could be a broken pot, it could be old bones that they cooked, it could be seeds, it could be maybe even something somebody lost and didn't mean to throw away. So when archaeologists start looking at middens, they find a treasure trove of things to tell us about what life was like a long time ago. And these middens are one of like the eating it raw. So also processing their animal skins. And these mats are some of the mats that they would have made out of cattails. So you can see how they're very, and then go back the next year and they'd all grow up again and have more. So that's what they look like in the picture. This is what they actually look like. You can see how they're folded over and woven together to make mats, and these mats were used to cover the outside of the house. But deer hide is what was used most to make the moccasins here. Why did they throw overhand? Because you can get more power and distance throwing overhand than underhand, and you have more control over the spear when you throw it overhand. And why did they hunt deer? Because there were lots and lots of deer, and also it provides not just the meat from the deer, but all those other tools that we talked about, from the bone and the antler. So you get more than just, one thing when you're hunting a deer. And there were like 12,000 years of Kentucky's history. So many people think that Native people only came to hunt here, but they were living here for thousands of years. In the late Archaic period, which is 8,000 to 1,000 BC, so that's 3,000 years ago, one of the first items that they started gardening in Kentucky is a World Hearth of Plant Domestication, which is, there's 6 places around the world where we know gardening started, and Kentucky is one of those places, which is pretty cool. As you move forward through the time frame, people stop. They never really stopped gardening, they never stopped hunting and gathering, but they started farming. So they started gardening on a huge scale. And then in the late prehistoric period is when you had some of those mounds starting to be created. People would make mounds out of some of those big shell middens. They also made mounds out of just dirt, and the mounds that they made in eastern Kentucky were different than the mounds they made in western Kentucky. 2 different groups of people. And we know that one side had Mississippian people and Mississippian culture, and the other side was Fort Ancient. So in the western part was a Mississippian tradition, and in the eastern part of the state was a Fort Ancient tradition. But they were still hunters and gatherers. They were still gardening and farming in both parts of the state. And those were the folks who essentially were kind of around right before the settlers came, because we know that in contact period, there were a number of reasons why kind of the population in Kentucky, the native people, kind of went away. So when the European settlers came into Kentucky, they didn't see these big, huge villages all across the state like there used to be before about 1500. So.
Welcome to the 5th grade from Stanford Elementary School. We are live, so if you ask a question, I will be glad to ask your question of Miss Tressa Brown as she gives us a tour of this exhibit.
The other thing I wanted to let you know is there are sites all across the state. So there's no county in Kentucky that does not have Native people living there a long time ago. And even today, there's Native people all over the state today. And they come from Kentucky or from other states to make Kentucky home. So all of these points on the map are where we know that Native people lived a long time ago. So you can find your place on the map and see what's near you. One of the things that we need to understand is that if there's not a point on the map where you are, it may not be just because people weren't there, it's because we haven't finished our research. There's lots of areas where we still need to do research to find out what was going on there. So that's why archaeologists are still in business.
Emily said she really likes Shawnee Indians.
Shawnee had the best and oldest claim to Kentucky. There are a lot of Shawnee people that are still in the state, and it's pretty cool to go to the websites for some of the Shawnee and look at what their recipes are, because a lot of their recipes still have corned beans and squash in them. And you can look to see how the Shawnee made their moccasins, so there you can find moccasin patterns too in order to maybe make your own.
Welcome to the 5th grade from Colony Elementary as well.
I don't know if we want to go to Megan and see what she's going to show.
Well, thank you, Tressa, for giving us a tour of our exhibit. For those that have just joined in, we've been exploring an exhibit that covers about 10,000 years of Native American history at the beginning of our main exhibition, A Kentucky Journey. And we've been exploring all of the different cultures that have been living in Kentucky for thousands of years. And now Miss Megan is going to lead us through some touchable artifacts that she has. And make sure you've got your clay or Play-Doh or salt dough ready, because at the end, we're going to do a little pinch pot activity right here with you.
Yeah, so let's do a review to see how much you remember from the tour. So right here I have some objects from my teaching collection, which means they are reproductions and you can touch them because they are made to look like the real thing. So let's start with the first one. I want you all to act as a historian and tell me what you think this is. What is it made of? What was it used for? If you remember back to the beginning of the tour, I believe it was in one of the pull-out drawers.
So Miss Patty's class has just joined us from Redbird Christian School. Make sure you comment below if you know what this artifact is or what it's made from, right?
Any guesses?
Any guesses? We'll move on to the next one and come back and give you some time to respond.
So that is made of the same material as this. Now you can guess what this is.
I think she's given us a big hint there for that one.
So this is actually a slipper or a shoe. And the reason that we know what this is made of is because of a story about what was found in Mammoth Cave.
Mammoth Cave, there's no part of Mammoth Cave that they've discovered recently that didn't have prehistoric people or people from the prehistoric era in it before them. So they have found sandals all through Mammoth Cave that have been either lost or worn out, and they were made out of rattlesnake master, which is a native plant to Kentucky.
So Josh Akers from Moorhead says that he believes that that basket is made out of reeds.
So could be.
It could be. They did make baskets out of reeds. They also made them out of all different kinds of material from different kinds of plant. It could be the inner bark of trees. It could be cattails. It could be rushes. There's so many different ways to make a basket.
So this would be great for hunting and gathering berries. So then later on, figuring out how to produce food another way, what do you think this is? This object reminds me of something we saw in the trash pile. Any guesses? So this is actually a garden hoe or a shovel. And so I want you to look at this image right here and try to figure out the time period that American Indians would have started planting seeds or cultivating, and then later on farming and harvesting. And if you remember back to what Tressa was saying, so in the middle of the page you'll see a sunflower. So that's from about 3,000 years ago, and sunflowers were first cultivated in the Red River Gorge area of Kentucky. And then later on in time, you'll notice up at the top, so about 1,000 years ago, they started planting corn and farming corn. And this person is actually using the same type of shovel that we have right here.
So William just guessed that that basket is a handbag, or what he says is a purse maybe. Where would that be on this timeline?
The bag probably down here with hunters and gatherers.
So this would be some of the oldest artifacts and time period in Kentucky.
Baskets were the first storage vessels because then once they figured out to cultivate and farm, they were staying in one location so they could start to work with ceramics and they wouldn't have to carry those around because those would break. Now let's take a look at this. What do you think this is? Can you hear that sound? So they're hard, there's a string in them. Think about what it was used for. Any guesses on these?
Give them just a moment. Where would they fall in the timeline while we give them a moment to think?
At the very top of the timeline.
At the very
All the
top
way
of the
up here.
timeline. Any guesses?
All right.
These ones happen to be glass beads, so they would have been traded in to by Europeans. And it was one of the first things that Native people got because they're lightweight, they're small, and you can pack them easily from place to place. And it was something they had never seen because they didn't produce anything in glass. All their beads before that were out of bone or shell or antler or even clay disc that they made. But the glass ones had to come from Europe.
All right, so now I have another interesting artifact here. So there's a piece of thread connecting this shape to this. Can you hear that? What do you think this is, or what is it made of? What was it used for? Let's see if I can, Any guesses on this one? Not really good at that if that's what that's supposed to be used for.
These are made from bone, and this piece is actually made from the toe bone of probably a deer. That piece could be made from any of the long bones that have been splintered out. You could use this. They made different kinds of games. So the ball and cup game that Megan was trying to play, that's one of the ones. You try to catch it like that. Or they made needles like this to poke holes and to do big sewing projects. And if you think about the thread that's holding them together, this is an artificial sinew. Originally, the sinew came from the tendon of the deer, so this whole thing could become one of the products of hunting those deer.
And using all parts of the animal.
Mm-hmm.
So Abby guessed correct. It's maybe a game.
Oh, good. So you'll have to try the cup and ball, maybe not with a bone toe, but you can maybe find something else around the house to make a cup and ball game.
And then going back to this, William guessed that it is a necklace.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to our clay project. So this is the time if you've already prepared your salt dough, or if you went in your backyard and dug up some clay or have some Play-Doh. So the first pots were made for cooking or storing seeds. And we also have a pot over here with an animal head that we'll point out. And that animal head is called an effigy, and it's on the rim. So those would be used for ceremonial purposes. All right, got my clay together. So this clay is red because there's a lot of iron in Kentucky's soil. And so that would be like the terracotta color pots, or if you've seen anything outside that's metal that rusts and it turns that orange color, so that's the iron. So you want to grab whatever you have, this material, and then start patting it into a ball. And I'm just moving the particles around. So I'm using clay, so it's much harder. If you're using salt dough at home, it's going to be easier, and you can probably roll it like this into a ball. And we're making a pinch pot. The first pots would have been coiled, and I'll show you that in a second, or pinch. So we're going to take our thumb, press it into the middle of the clay ball. Give me a thumbs up. Take your fingers on the outside. You're going to press your thumb towards your fingers and use your other hand to rotate it. As you press and rotate, it's making the clay walls thinner. And that is our goal. So wherever it's thick, we're going to press. And you can see it's starting to form a pot. But this is pretty small, so I want to make it wider. So I'm going to put both thumbs in and press and rotate. Now with larger balls of clay, you could even use your fist, and that technique is called punching. And from evidence that we have, the first pots had a round bottom. And Tressa, do we know why that is?
We know that they set them, in kind of soil on the ground. So they were kind of embedded in the ground. That's the way they stood.
Okay, and that would be good for a fire too, to press it into the ash. All right, so mine's getting pretty big. Is anybody else doing this at home? You'll have to post a picture of what yours looks like.
Yes, when you're done, make sure you post pictures because we will be curious to see how your clay pots turned out.
Now what's great about this is if you mess up, you can fold it back into a ball and start again, okay? Now with ours, you can even pat it if you want it to set up on a table. And then the last thing to finish it up, this is my bone tool, but you can use a pencil at home and you can carve designs. You can even use it like a stamp and press, or like Tressa was saying, how they used fabric, which is how we know what type of fabric they would have had, and pressing on the outside. You can imprint it that way too. And I want you to look at some of these designs that were found in Kentucky, drawn by Native Americans. So let's have a guessing game again. What do you think this one is? Anybody guessing on that one?
We'll call that one number 1. If you figure it out, post number 1 and your answer.
And these two are from Madison County. And what do you think that one is?
So this will be number 2. If you know what it is, post number 2 and your answer.
The next one is from Lee County.
This is card number 3. Post 3 and your answer.
And then number 4.
Oh, that one's a
also from
hard
Lee
one.
County.
From where?
Lee County.
Lee County. This is number 4. Post 4 and your answer. We'll give you a few moments to respond. Oh, we've got some answers coming in. I'll wait. All right, go ahead and keep telling us about coil.
So I'm going to demonstrate a coil. So if you grab your clay, you're going to squeeze it out, making a long hot dog shape. Now you've probably done a coil like this before, rolling it out. But what I want you to try is, because the first coils were made in the air. So you're going to squeeze it. And this is how you can make very large pots. So I've seen pots with coils that were this big in diameter. And you just keep spreading out your fingers. And you can also do it on the table. I can't wait to hear some of those answers, especially about number 4, because I still don't know what
There's a
that
funny
is.
one for number 4. I'll read it. I'll read the answers in just a moment.
All right, so making large coils, and then these would be coiled around or wrapped around to keep building up a pot. And then they would be smoothed.
So how many coils might make a pot?
Well, it depends on the size. So if I wanted to make one this big, probably about 20 coils. Keep going all the way around, make a tall vase, and then don't forget the bottom. All right, let's hear some of those guesses.
Okay, we've had lots of answers. For number 1, Josh guessed that it's a person. Good job,
All
Josh.
right, yeah. And I'll flip them over as you do it.
So that's a human from Madison County is where this drawing, is that what it's a
drawing?
pictograph, right?
Yeah.
And they were
Pictographs.
found in,
Most of these are found in rock overhangs, not quite caves. Some of them have been found in caves. There's also drawings that have been found in mud way down deep in caves. So some of these are kind of on stone panels just kind of by the trail. Not all of them have been found in caves. So you can find rock art, again, in most every county.
Okay, the second one, we've got a couple of opinions. Don't turn it over yet.
right.
We have a couple of guesses that it could be an eagle. We have Kitty guessed that it could be a raven. Let me look through some of the other responses. An eagle or a thunderbird, says Christy. eagle from someone else, from William. So what is it?
Let's see. Oh, raptorial bird.
Raptorial bird, which would basically be any kind of,
Yeah.
like an eagle or a
Eagle,
falcon or
Falcons, hawks,
hawks,
owls, yeah,
sure.
any of those. Even a buzzard.
even a buzzard?
Even a buzzard.
All right. Was the thunderbird something that was an idea in Kentucky?
Yes. The Shawnee and Cherokee both have stories with thunderbirds in them.
Okay.
So that could be somebody's illustration of one of those stories.
And a raven?
Could be.
Could be. All right. And number 3, we have several guesses from Amanda and Josh and Jason and Christy and Abby and Patty and William that is a turtle.
Oh, you got it.
Good guess. And that's from Lee County. And then our 4th one, this will be a funny one. So this could be, let's see, Amanda thinks this is a deer with a bird on its back. Michelle thinks it's a horse on fire. Any other guesses for number 4 before we reveal the answer?
All right, let's see. Oh, animal.
Just an animal. What is on the back of that? Could you tell?
We have no idea. I mean, it could be a scribble. It could be somebody's graffiti from 1,000 years ago. We can only say what we see in it, not what the artist saw in it. So it is an animal. It could be a horse on fire, and it could be who knows what.
Great
Those are some good
answers,
guesses.
guys.
All right. So any other questions for us?
We'll turn it over to you guys. Any questions at all for Miss Tressa or for Miss Megan?
And then I'll tell you about next week. All right.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us about next week, and then I'll read any questions that come through.
So next Tuesday at 1 p.m. we have a live tour of the Old State Capitol. It's going to focus on architecture. And then on Thursday we will be settling Kentucky into the Kentucky frontier at 1 p.m.
So you're getting a little preview of what you'll see next week.
And then if you're enjoying these tours and you want to support the Kentucky Historical Society, please become a member at history.ky.gov. Or if you're filing your taxes, you can do that tax checkoff, and it's the Local History Trust Fund.
So next Tuesday will be our architectural tour of the Old State Capitol, and we'll be exploring this exhibit next Thursday.
Yes.
So make sure you remember that and tell your parents that you want to join us here.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you all.
We have a question. Were they firing their pots yet, or were they just drying them?
They were firing them, open fired. Usually they did it by piling up their pots to be fired on an open fire and then covering them up and leaving them there until they were hard enough.
And
Gotcha.
they would use fuel like manure, any combustible material to light that.
Gotcha. Any other questions before we go? You can help support programs like this by donating to the Kentucky Local History Trust Fund, which benefits different historical organizations across the state, or you can become a member of the Kentucky Historical Society to help us continue to offer programming like this. We're really grateful to have all of you guys connect with us today. Thanks to our special guest, Tressa Brown from the Heritage Council. Anything you want to tell us about your work with the Heritage Council?
It's ongoing, so even though we're not in the office, we're still working hard.
Yes, they are, and we are glad to have you in here today. I believe we've shared a couple of different links to the Heritage Council. They've got a great collection of resources that go really well with the lesson that you've just participated in and the tour that you've just participated in. And we've posted some of those, but we'll make sure to post those again. You can also find them on our virtual visitor webpage, and this includes not only I think it was a 16-page document that you can find on their website, but also a list of a bunch of other resources too. Thank you guys very much for joining us, and we will see you again next Tuesday.